Hello everyone and welcome back to UE5 BP Guru. We're back in the Pokemon Clone multiplayer tutorial, and we're going to be exploring the next steps in our kind of starting the battle. And in the last episode, I taught you how to spawn in the battle world, ready for your players to start using to initiate fights and all that sort of stuff. And we're going to now start getting things going. So spawning in creatures and changing camera angles and all that sort of stuff. Most of the code for the next probably 10-20 episodes are all going to take place within our battle proxy, because that controls near enough everything. But we are going to be setting this up in a way that works in multiplayer. So it's going to need the ability to determine choices and all that sort of stuff. So, but before we get ahead of ourselves, let's just concentrate on actually getting everything spawned in as it should. Now, this is just showing you how it's done. You will have to kind of almost change it to fit your narrative. So if you want pauses and things to slow down and, you know, all that kind of good stuff, you're going to need to amend it to fit your own narrative. But for this point, we're just going to get you actually working. So to begin with, we can delete the overview camera. That was just for testing purposes. We're going to be creating a lot of functions, a lot of variables. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and keep everything as neat, as tidy as possible. The first thing we want to do is set the trainer visibility. So sorry, I don't know why I typed that in there. We need to create a function, and we're going to call it set trainer visibility. There you go. And this is basically just going to set whether it's going to set up whether we can see the trainer or not within the battle world. So we need to create a new variable, and we're going to set this variable is encounter. And what we're going to do is click on that is encounter, and we're going to set it to instance editable and expose on spawn. And we'll be able to see immediately what that does in a second. But let's do the code for this first. So we're going to get all actors of class. And the actor we're looking for is the NPC battle actor we created in the last episode. And this is basically going to drive whether we see this in the actual fight scene or not. And we're going to do a get. Now, I'm not going to show you how you set its materials and what it's wearing. That's kind of, you'll have to do that yourself. That's what you need to work out. Because everyone's going to do that differently. So you just do that how you want to do it. But this is just going to set the actual visibility of that trainer. I will give you a tip though, if you're wondering, I would do it in here. If you're going to set the visibility to true, then I'd be setting whatever it's wearing via that. So we're going to get all actors of class. We're going to get the mesh from that get. Now, we can leave it at 0 because there's only ever going to be one in the world. We're only ever going to have one for us. We're also going to get that is encounter, and we're going to plug that in. And then all we need to do is set the visibility of that depending on whether it's an encounter or not. Now, if it is an encounter, we don't want to be able to see it. And if it's not an encounter, we do want to be able to see it. Don't forget to plug that mesh variable into both of these. And that's literally all you need to do for that one. Let's just do that. That looks good. Compile. If we go back to the event graph, we can place that there. Now, before we move on, if we head over to our third person character and we go down to where we are spawning our spawn actor for our battle proxy, you can now see we have an is encounter variable there that we can now set. And what we want to do is every time we have an SP battle start, we want this encounter to be true. That way, Every time we have a wild encounter, we know it is an encounter. When we come to do the multiplayer code, we'll set that to false, so we know it's not an encounter. Same for trainer battles as well. Now, you could have this come through from the SP battle start, which we might do in the future, so that when it's a non-multiplayer when it's a non-multiplayer battle, but it's a single player battle, we can set that through either the encounter BP or the trainer BP we will eventually set up. So we might eventually plug that in there to fix that problem. But for now, because we're only going to face wild encounters, this works fine. Excuse me. Back over to the battle proxy. We are going to now set up a little bit of dialogue. I haven't myself set up the dialogue yet. So for now, all we're going to do in there, eventually we will add the dialogue in there. But what we're going to do for now, until we can do that, is all we're going to do is just set the camera to look at that enemy trainer. So if it's not an encounter, we're going to set it to the NPC camera. If it is an encounter, what we should do is set this to the enemy camera. So we look at that wild creature, that wild Pokemon. Compile that, and that's all we need to do in there for now. As I say, eventually we will add in a little bit of dialogue, like a wild Charmander appeared, or we would say Trainer Ryan wants to fight. You know, whatever it would be is what we'll put in there. Then we're going to do a branch. The reason we're going to do a branch is because I think the reason I did that was for that camera switch, because it waits 1.5 seconds and then we spawn. So I don't think we actually need that at this point in time. We might add that back in at a later date. So typically you'd have like a delay within the dialogue so that you have time to kind of have the dialogue on screen and then for it to disappear before something would happen. If it's a wild encounter, I suppose you may want for the wild encounter to have already spawned before you see that. So possibly we might need to change things up. I suppose it depends on what you want to have happen. So we're going to spawn an enemy Pokemon now. From here, we're going to do a get all actors of class. And the class we're looking for is the enemy spawn BP. We're looking for wherever that is. And now we need to create another variable. And this one is going to be, we want it to be an F Pokemon party info. And we're going to set that to an array. And we're going to call this the enemy team. And we're again going to instance editable and expose on spawn. We're also going to give this a category. So on the right hand side, we're just going to put enemy variables, and we'll group anything that's to do with the enemy team under that variable. For the is encounter, we're going to create a category called condition. So that'll mainly be booleans. And then we've got the camera switch. We'll leave out because we use that quite a bit. So we need to get that enemy team, and we need to do a for each loop with break. And we're basically looking for the first Pokemon that doesn't have that does have health. Sorry, so we're going to break this, we also want a few other variables. So we need to keep the Pokemon name. We also need to keep if it's shiny or not. So is it shiny? And we also need to keep its final stats. And we're going to break those final stats, like so. And then we're going to take that HP and we're going to just check to see if it's greater than 1. And if we do a break here, we'll bring that down and we'll kind of fit that in there nicely. And if it's true, we are going to create another variable. This time it's going to be a single variable and it's going to be an integer. And we're going to call that current enemy index. And if that comes back true, we're going to set it as the array, the index array we're getting from the array, like so, just like that. And that's when, once we found one, that's when we commit our break. We want to say, okay, we found something. We know that there's a Pokemon that can be spawned. And we'll plug that in there, like so. Then, from our break, we're going to do a get data table row. And that row is going to be our basic info data table. And we can plug that in there like that. And we're going to plug the name in of the Pokemon we found so that we can spawn it. And then we need to break that information. And the only things we should need from this are the 2 classes that we created in a past episode, the shiny and the non-shiny one. And we need a branch, like here, like so. And the branch is checking to see if this Pokemon we have found is shiny. Just going to try and keep things as clean as possible. So that comes in there to check if that Pokemon is shiny. And if the Pokemon is shiny, we're going to do a get a copy, like so. And we'll just sort of do that so it's kind of neat. And we need to get the actor location. And we also need to get the actor rotation, like so. And from that, we also need to spawn actor from class. And you probably kind of already know what's happening here, but we need to plug the shiny one into this top one here and the non-shiny into there. And we're going to split that spawn transform. And again, plug in this actor into both the location and the rotation for both. And from that, we are going to set the we're going to promote this, promote to a variable, and that is going to be our enemy Pokemon. And you can plug this into both, just like so. And so what we've got here is a method of finding ourselves a viable Pokemon that can battle, and then spawning that Pokemon at our enemy spawn location. And if we go back to our event graph, we can plug that spawn enemy Pokemon into there. And that should be that spawned in for us as well. Now, again, what would come after this is another dialogue. So, enemy dialogue. And, oh, this is where we have the camera switch to the enemy. So, this is where it would come up saying either go... so, this is where my thought process is. I haven't obviously done the dialogue yet. So we can actually go back into the enemy dialogue, get rid of that. So if it's an enemy dialogue, we've already set the enemy to visible. So this would come up saying basically, Trainer Ryan wants to battle. Then it would spawn. So we would spawn the enemy. We would spawn the enemy Pokemon, and we'd switch to that camera, and it would say, "Go, Pidgey." As an example. The order seems a little bit messed up in my opinion. So again, the order still might need changing, but that was my thought process on this. So again, this is what I mean by you'll need to change it up depending on what you want to have happen. So if you want dialogue to appear before the Pokemon spawns, you need to do that. You need to make that change. But to do that, you would just almost swap out the different dialogues and put them in different places. These two should be in the correct place. It's just this enemy dialogue, whether you want that to come up before the spawn enemy. But if it's not an encounter, if it is an encounter, you probably want it to come afterwards. Spawn the Pokemon, then you look at the Pokemon and you say, "Oh, a wild whatever has appeared." So you would have to play around with this a little bit, but it is doable. You just need to reorganize it a little bit. And then we would realistically do a delay, and I will say, 1.5 to 2 seconds is normally a pretty decent delay, but again, everyone's different, so you need to amend that how that fits for you. And finally, we'll finish up with the enemy stuff. What we would do is then add this Pokemon we've seen to our Pokedex. So we're going to make one final function for today, which is going to be add to Pokedex. And we're going to take our enemy team reference, and we're going to run that through a for each loop. And we should already have our Pokedex set up, if I remember correctly, so we should be able to do this in today's episode. If not, we'll have to possibly flesh this out in another episode, but we'll see. We're going to take our current enemy index, which should be under enemy variables, and so should this enemy Pokemon. So let's put that all under enemy variables. Get our current enemy index. Don't set it, get it. And what we're doing is we are looking for the Pokemon we've just seen. Because we're checking to see if we've seen it before. Like so. And once we've found that, I realized we need a for each loop with break, not a normal one. So quickly just transfer over the pins if you've done it like me, like so. There we go, and we can do that. Right, and we can then, if we find it, we can put it into here, which we should always find it. It should never come back false. It will only come false for the ones that do not match that current enemy index, but we should always be able to find it. And once we find it, we break so that we don't overwrite these this information that's in the array, and we can break that information. And the only thing we need from that is the Pokemon name, like so. So we can get rid of all of those and just keep that. And then what we want to do is we want to get a data table row, which again is going to be our basic information. So plug that in there, keep things nice with reroute nodes, and move that forward a little bit, just so we can. I like to I'm trying to keep this as neat and as tidy as possible, so it doesn't just become straight up spaghetti code. So we're then gonna break this, and the reason we're breaking it mainly is for that index number and the name, wherever that is, Pokemon name. There we go. So those are the only 2 pins we should need from this, because that's all we're going to store in our Ringdex. Oh, Pokedex, should say. And then we are going to get, so we should have a third-person character reference and that will come from also from the main game. So if we go third person character, we get an object reference like so, and instance editable and expose on spawn. That way we don't have to do any casts. We're just going to pass this reference straight through. So we're going to do a get trainer info like so, and we're going to break that to get the Pokedex that we are looking for. Bring it to here, and what we want to do is get is valid index like so, and we're checking it against that index number. And that's the first thing we're gonna check on this branch like so. The next branch, so if we say that comes back true, we're going to do a get. So we're going to get a reference, and that reference again is going to be the index number, and we're going to break that to see if it is caught. If that's true, we're going to set array elem, and the array we're going to be setting is the the Pokedex, just even Pokedex. I'm going to bring this up just ever so slightly so it's all flowing kind of correctly. And then we're going to make this, and we're just going to keep everything exactly the same. We'll set that to core. So that way nothing gets overwritten by doing this, and the index is always going to be that one there. So we can run it just marginally underneath there. And if it's true, if it's false, sorry, we haven't caught this Pokemon before, we're going to come off the false and plug that in there. And just to save me making loads of different lines and unfortunately making spaghetti code, I'm just going to run that down from there. And we're then also going to make ourselves another Pokedex entry, and both of these will plug in directly from that basic information. And the other thing we need to do is size to fit. The reason we click on the size to fit is so that if we have Pokemon 100 in the Pokedex, but we don't have, let's say we then are introduced to Pokemon 120, if we don't size to fit, it'll check the Pokemon index and realize it doesn't fit it within the array, and it'll never get added. So we size to fit just for that scenario, and that should be all you need to do for that one. So we're going to add that Pokemon there, and to be honest, it doesn't really matter if this goes before or after the delay. The delay is to slow it down in between spawning the enemy and then spawning the player. So at this point in time, we should, in theory, now see a Pokemon. And we can test that by going straight into, if we pick up a Pokemon, let's grab Bulbasaur. Let's call him Dave. As always, Dave's been added to the party. Good old Dave. We're going to go over here. And we're just going to... Oh, wait a minute. There's a few things I haven't done. And I just thought about it. I'm getting ahead of myself. We need to, first of all, amend this. So the third person character reference, we can get a reference to self. And the enemy team will need to come from the SP battle. So let's bring that down a wee bit, like so. And we just need to go into the encounter BP. And we need to plug in our enemy team reference straight into here and compile. There is one other thing we will need to do in here, but that is for something down the line. But eventually we will have to add one more at least one more into here, minimum. So now that we've fixed those two references there, we can now test to see if Bulbasaur appears. I've just called him Bulbasaur this time. I didn't call him Dave. I apologize. I know everyone's looking forward to me when I call him Dave, but I'm so sorry. Oh, something happened there. So it is triggering something, but it's not moving the camera over. So we're going to work it out in a minute why. But I wanted to eject and see if it still ran the rest of the code. Okay, so we've stopped. And if you look down here, we have got an enemy. The camera broke, but we have got an enemy Squirtle, which is great. So let's see what's going on here. So this worked because we didn't have our enemy visible, so that's great. We went into our enemy dialogue and we said, is this an encounter? We said no. So we said it is, sorry, it is. So that didn't do anything, which is good. We then spawned our enemy, which we know worked. We went into enemy dialogue, and that should have put us into the enemy camera. So let's try a different one. Maybe we didn't find enemy camera. Oh, I know why we didn't get enemy camera. That is because we don't have the enemy camera set up yet. That's a good point. We need to set that up once we've got our reference to player and reference to party and reference to enemy. So that would explain why we didn't get a camera switch. So let's try it now. Bulbasaur's been added, great. And we're going to test to see now if we have our wonderful enemy spawned into the world. And if we have, success. There's Bulbasaur, great. We have Bulbasaur. He's non-shiny, that's fine. I'm not complaining. 1 in 4,000 chance. But it is working. We have no enemy player, but we do have our wild Pokemon spawned. So with that working, that's going to be the end of this episode. In the next episode, we'll get the party spawning in, and then we can get down to all the fun stuff and finish setting up the camera and stuff. But thanks so much, guys, for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If you have, give it a little like. Thank you again, as always, to all the new members. I appreciate it. I think we're up to 6 now. If you haven't yet, go and claim your member status in the Discord. You get a fun little area where you can ask me questions personally, and you'll get answered before anyone else. So yeah, go and check that out. Make sure you claim that, as that's part of the package. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye.